Okay, I believe we're on here, folks. We're going to respond to a comment today. My wife has told me about a comment that I think she's seen once or twice on her videos or my videos. Someone asking about a lunar Sabbath. I have debunked that before in my blog post, but I don't think I've ever done a video about that. So let's try it today. We're going to call this one Lunar Sabbath Debunked again. I'm going to try to keep it simple and short, I hope. Short as possible. We're going to just go through basically Genesis 1 and the first few verses of Genesis 2. I probably won't even read all of the scripture detail in the creation week. But let's start in Genesis 1. 1:1. In the beginning, the Almighty created the heavens and the earth. We see from the very first word in the Bible, Yahweh invented and created time. So how do we understand time? We understand time as a 24-hour clock of hours, minutes, and seconds. So we have Yahweh's stopwatch started in the very beginning. So in my last video, we saw the day when Yahweh stops his stopwatch and the universe was locked into its future glory for all eternity. Right now, we're looking at the beginning of that clock, of that calendar that Yahweh started way back when. So what's the second thing that Yahweh invented and created? The heavens and the earth. Empty space and the mud ball we call home or earth rotating on at that time, a non-tilted axis as far as we believe, spinning about 1,000 miles per hour, giving us a 24-hour day. And all this was 4 days before the sun, moon, and stars were invented or created. And all this was in perfection, beauty, and goodness. The earth was without form and empty, and darkness was upon the surface of the deep. The Ruach of the Almighty was moving above the surface of the waters. So what about verse 2? We find the earth, tohu and wabohu, formless, wet, and empty. So in the first 3 days of creation, the wet earth and the heavens received their form. Then in the last 3 days of creation, Yahweh fills up the emptiness of the heavens and the earth. At this point, we have a wet desert wasteland of earth spinning around and flying through empty space. And Job knew it, and Job 26:7 says, he stretches out the northern skies over the empty space, tohu, and he hangs the earth over nothing. Good thing he's got a hold of us, huh? The Almighty said, let there be light, and there was light. So we see that Yahweh's next invention in creation is light. Think about that for as long as you want to. Yahweh had been living in total darkness for all eternity before time, and he created light without the sun. I think that's pretty cool. The Almighty saw the light, that it was good. He divided the light from the darkness. The Almighty called the light day, and the darkness he called night. This was dusk through daylight, the first day. So, on the first day of creation, Yahweh separated darkness from light. He created day and night. And no sun, no moon, or stars are present yet. How is this possible? Well, the earth was spinning 12 hours in the darkness, 12 hours in the light. Remember, 1,000 miles an hour. We're spinning around. Yahweh began creation week on a Saturday night, probably around 6:01 p.m., approximately, for our argument's sake. The Almighty said, let there be an expanse between the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. The Almighty made the expanse and divided the waters which were under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. It was so. The Almighty called the expanse sky. This was dusk through daylight, the second day. On the second day of creation, Yahweh made the sky, or our atmosphere, in several different layers, but still no sun, moon, or stars are present. We call this day Monday, of course. The Almighty said, let the waters under the sky be gathered together to one place, and let the dry land appear. It was so. The Almighty called the dry land earth, and the gathered waters he called seas, and he saw that it was good. The Almighty said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed and fruit trees bearing fruit, whose seed is in the fruit, each according to its kind. And it was so. The earth produced vegetation, plants producing seed after their kind, trees bearing fruit, whose seed was in it after their kind. The Almighty saw that it was good. This was dusk through daylight, the third day. So we see on the third day of creation, Yahweh created oceans, rivers, lakes, streams, and vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and trees. We call this day Tuesday. But notice there's still no sun, moon, or stars. Only plants producing oxygen. So now we have a dry earth with some oceans and some plants, and they're all starting to grow, of course. But they can't grow very long, of course, right? Without the sun, moon, stars. We're still missing some parts. The Almighty said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to divide the day from the night, and let them be as signs for seasons, for days and years. Let them be lights in the expanse of the sky to give light upon the earth." It was so. The Almighty made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light, the stars, to rule the night. The Almighty set them in the expanse of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. The Almighty saw that it was good. This was sunset through daylight, the fourth day. Wow, finally we see Yahweh invent and create the sun and the stars. But it doesn't say anything about the moon, though I suspect it was created in that day. But he does not mention the moon. The word is not there. The word moon is not found in Scripture until Genesis 37:9, when Joseph sees the moon in a dream as a representation of his mom bowing down to him. That's at least 2,000 years after creation. So back to Genesis 1. We see Yahweh more finely dividing light and darkness by inventing and creating the luminaries. That's the word used here in Genesis 1. We know luminaries as the burning gas balls called stars today, which of course includes our sun. Yahweh invents and creates days, seasons, and years. Yahweh tells us he created the sun and stars to define days, seasons, and years, but months are not defined here. So just take note of that. That's quite interesting. The moon is not mentioned, nor are months mentioned, but the day and the year are now delineated to help divide light and darkness and the seasons of the year, winter from summer. Now we know the year will be one revolution of the earth around the sun. So we see that Yahweh began creation with a solar calendar, which we believe was 360 days long. We discover that the sun, the greater light, rules over the day, and the stars, the lesser light, rule over the night. We don't have a sunset until day 4 of creation. So I do need to mention here that the word for seasons in verse 14 is the word moedim. It's the same word we use for the appointment calendar festivals of Yahweh. But in the context of creation week, the word is used here specifically to discuss the seasons of the year. Why would I say that? Because we're going to let Scripture interpret Scripture. Genesis 8:22 says, "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night will not cease." So he's not talking about the Moedim, as we understand, the festivals of Yahweh, not yet. Psalm 74:17 says, "You have set all the borders of the earth. You have made summer and winter." Genesis 8:22 and Psalm 74:17 are direct references to Genesis 1 and the creation of the seasons. Notice the Holy Scriptures are ignorant of our 4 seasons in the year. The Scriptures never discuss solstices or equinoxes. It only knows the 2-season year, winter and summer. That is what Yahweh created the sun to determine. When we're going to be warm, when we're going to be hot. And then we can go on, we can read in the following days, waters filled with living creatures and the birds in the sky. That's on the 5th day. You get the heavens and the waters and the seas filling up with all their creatures. That's the 5th day. During the 5th day of creation, Yahweh created sea critters and birds. And then we get on to the 6th day, and the earth produced living creatures. Then we know livestock, beasts, creepy crawly things on the earth, the dry land critters are all created on the 6th day. And also mankind, Adam and Eve, are created on the 6th day of creation. So I'm not going to read all that detail. So we see on the 6th day of creation, Yahweh created land animals, beasts, large and small, livestock and such. Yahweh also created Adam and Eve, mankind, which is going to then also be explained again in more detail on that creation of Adam and Eve in chapter 2. So let's go over to chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. "Then the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the living things that filled them. On the 6th day the Almighty came to the end of his work which he had done, and so he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. The Almighty blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which he had done in his creation." In Genesis chapter 2, verse 2 and 3, we see Yahweh rested on the 7th day of the week. Yahweh blessed the 7th day and set it apart as a day of rest for himself and for all creation. Now, I want you to think about what you've read in Genesis 1 through chapter 2, verse 3. Yahweh counted 3 days of that first week without the sun, moon, or stars even created. And the moon's not even mentioned, so I probably shouldn't even say the word moon. Just the sun and the stars were created. What does that tell us? Yahweh was counting days by the 24-hour stopwatch he created in chapter 1, verse 1. No sun was needed, no moon was needed, no stars were needed to begin counting the first week of creation. The immediate conclusion from this is that the Sabbath is determined by 24-hour day counts, not by the sun, a lunar month, or even the stars. The lunar Sabbath concept is heresy. It is a myth. The moon is not even mentioned in the first 3 chapters of Genesis, but the Sabbath is mentioned as a verb here, the Shabbat, the action word to rest. Do you know what this means? It means we can assign a day number to every day of creation. We could give this week's Sabbath that's coming up here, we could give it a numeral, singularly identifying this day apart from all other days in history, and it would be easily tied to the 7th day of creation with a numeral identifier of 7, the first Sabbath, because all the weeks of history can be evenly divided by 7. We can tie every week in all creation together just by a simple count of the days, 7 days in each week. All Sabbaths since that first Sabbath week of creation are connected by a simple count of 7 days, independent of months, seasons, or years. There simply is no such thing as a lunar Sabbath. What appears as a lunar Sabbath during the implementation of manna in Exodus 16 only appears as a lunar Sabbath for that first month of manna. By the time the next lunar month rolled around, the lunar Sabbath was immediately broken, since a lunar Sabbath requires a perfect 28-day month. We've never had a perfect 28-day month, solar or lunar, as far as I know. We had perfect 30-day months in Adam, Noah's, and Moses' day, but now we have a 29.5-day lunar month. And the scriptures are clear. The sun has only to do with defining days, seasons, and years, not with defining months. As we learned in my last video, we defined the lunar months in Exodus 2:2 with the word lunations. By the time Moses got around to explaining the feasts of Yahweh, including the Sabbath, in Leviticus 23, the clock calendar definition of the Sabbath had already been in operation for several thousand years. Let's take a peek. Leviticus 23, 1-3. Yahweh spoke to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointment calendar festivals of Yahweh, which you must proclaim as holy assemblies. They are my appointment calendar festivals. You may work for 6 days, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy assembly. You must do no work, because it is a Sabbath for Yahweh in all the places where you live." Wow. Notice, please, dear viewers and readers, that Moses re-emphasized that the Sabbath is determined by a 7-day count, not a lunar month date. Moses wrote Genesis 1-3, so Moses was instructed personally by Yahweh that the creation week and first Sabbath were determined by a 24-hour, 7-day count. Meditate on verse 3 for as long as you need to, but let it soak into your mind and spirit that the Sabbath is based on a day count, not a date on a lunar or solar calendar. It's what defines our week for us, even to this very day. There's just simply no such thing as a lunar Sabbath. It is heresy. Yahweh bless each of you all. You have a wonderful day. Enjoy your holidays. We love you all. Take care. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.